All right, it's official. The Breathless Jam second edition has officially launched. We have over 100 participants, and I'm so excited. I'm very, very excited about this, especially even more so that many of you have decided to build adventures for the game, which, yeah, I'm just pumped. But one of the things that many of you, and myself included, have realized recently, or re-realized in my case, is that Breathless doesn't include a lot of lore. So if we take a look at this pamphlet, it's just a bifold pamphlet, right? So we have the rules and character creation. We have the character sheet on the other side and a cover. So what is the lore of the game? And it only says, the city has been walled up from the outside. You're stuck with breathless crawlers roaming as far as the eye can see. You are surrounded by strangers, and the only thing left to do is survive. You can't give up now. That's it. That's all you know about the lore of the game. There are some rolling tables that will kind of hint at some factions within the game or some locations and like some problems that could hint at other things. But that's kind of like the gist of it. And one of the things with zombie media that I feel is very interesting is, well, zombies. Like, what makes a zombie interesting? And if you take a look at things like The Last of Us, which has been a big inspiration for Breathless, I've always been a big Last of Us fan. And one thing that I love about this video game series is that the zombies are very unique, right? They're based off spores and mushrooms, and there are very different kinds of zombies, with some of them like where the mushrooms are kind of like spawned from the eyes of the zombies and makes them blind. Now they only have to rely on their hearing, and those creatures are horrifying, the clickers and all of that, and there are bloaters, and they're like kind of zombies that can merge together. All of this is super interesting, and when you compare it, for example, to zombies in The Walking Dead, which I think is a bit less interesting. Like they're kind of like your traditional zombies, and they don't really change or evolve. But if you compare them, for example, to Left 4 Dead, the old video game series, there's a lot of different kinds of zombies in there, and they get attracted to noise and fire, and they have special abilities, and it works for video games. But those zombies are still very cool and interesting. Um, what else? Well, there's I Am a Legend, which is inspired by a book, which I think was written in the 70s. And those zombies are actually closer to vampires because they can be smart, they can talk, they are afraid of the sun, they get burned by the sun. And those are all things that makes them very unique. Or even the zombies from 28 Days Later, well, those zombies, it's closer to some sort of rage, right? They start running and they're very aggressive. So, what makes the zombies of Breathless unique? And one idea that I started thinking about is this idea of like, well, why are they dead and how can they still be alive? And one thing that I've started thinking about is this idea of when you're alive, as humans, we breathe oxygens, and we take this oxygen to essentially feed our body, feed our lungs, right? And then we exhale CO2. And I think it could be so interesting if the zombies in Breathless actually kind of switched around, where they consume CO2 to kind of stay alive, or alive in quotes. And I think that would make them so interesting because, well, as humans, we are CO2 machines. Every time we breathe, there's like 4% of the air that we're letting out that's CO2. So I started thinking about this idea of the zombies literally trying to like look and hunt for CO2 areas where there's a bunch of humans, and the humans kind of exhale CO2, and it creates some sort of like thing that the zombies could look for. And then they start hunting for this. And when they find them, they literally content warning. We're entering horror territory here. But I think this idea of like the zombies attaching themselves, like attaching mouth to mouth to a living human to let them breathe out their last breaths to consume some CO2 before they just kill the human and then move on. This idea was terrifying, and I think that's something that I want to explore with the kind of zombies that I imagine crawlers to be in Breathless. Also, like it brings a bunch of other interesting aspects. Like for example, like if we consider cities, well, during the night, like I would imagine the zombies kind of like leaving cities and kind of go inside forests because trees generate a lot of CO2 during the night as they consume oxygen and like generate CO2 with photosynthesis. So forests would be good for, well, trees in general would be good for kind of hiding, but there would also be a lot of zombies during the night in the forests. And inside cities, if there are still zombies that are there, you would kind of stick out as like a thing that generates CO2 in the random in the middle of a city, right? So I think there are some aspects that are worth exploring with this kind of mentality, right? This kind of zombie. And yeah, like in terms of like adventures, like there's so many things to explore, as in like, well, like there are different phases when you think of zombie media in general. Like there's always kind of the day zero kind of thing where like this is when it happens and how we try to survive in the moment, like minute to minute. And then if we move on a couple of years or months later, then as we start to reform communities, and it's not just about survival, but it's about rebuilding something, right? And eventually we started amassing a number of resources, and those resources we want to protect, right? From other human factions or from zombies, and both of those options. And then eventually it's possible that we lose everything again and we go back to some sort of like day zero. And I think this way of seeing things is something that I personally want to explore in the adventures that I want to write for Breathless. Kind of like this 3-act structure of like, this is when it happened, and this is how we rebuilt things, and this is how we lost everything again. So, yeah, that's all I have for today. I hope it starts to inspire you as to what you want to do for the jam. And if you have any questions, drop them down below. Also, don't forget to join the Discord. And yeah, talk to you soon. Cheers.